So let me start off by telling you, first of all, say hello. My name is Becca Oliver. I'm the executive director here at the Writers League of Texas. For those of you who are not familiar with the Writers League of Texas, we're the largest literary arts organization in this great Lone Star state of ours, and we put on programming year-round to support writers. So whether you're just getting started, not quite yet ready to call yourself a writer, all the way to publishing your 10th book, anywhere in between, we have something for you and our benefits and services. And we love, love, love to have interesting conversations with writers that we admire on craft, on the business side of publishing, and that's what we're here to do today. But first, a few announcements. So I'll start out by telling you that we have a great class coming up tomorrow night. Amy Gentry, who is a wonderful, very acclaimed author, is going to be talking about plotting your novel in 3 acts. She is a genius when it comes to structure. I've been lucky enough to learn from Amy. So if you're looking for ways to get back into a novel you've already started, maybe see how fixing or working or toying with the plot might help you, I would say Amy's class is great for you. If you're just getting started and you're not even sure how to start plotting, Amy's class could be great for you. And if you're just interested in thinking about different ways to structure stories, whether you've started something or not, then her class could be great for you. So consider that tomorrow night. This Thursday, because we're all about structure, this is actually it's not infrastructure week, it's structure week at the Writers League of Texas, because we have our structure class tomorrow. And then we're talking about structure, really just breaking the mold on structure at our third Thursday program this Thursday, every month, except for December. So this will be our last third Thursday of the year. We like to bring writers together to talk about a particular topic of interest to writers. And so for this month, we're talking about structure. This will be the debut of our new program director, Sarah Renee Beach, leading her first moderated conversation with us. We're so excited for that. And 3 really wonderful writers. So you can RSVP on our website. This is free and open to anyone. We also will live stream it on YouTube and have the recording available afterwards, but we hope you'll spend some time with us this Thursday night. Also want to remind you, we're coming to the end of a year-long program we call the Agent Symposium. It is all about helping writers understand the publishing side of the business through hearing directly from literary agents, 10 different literary agents throughout the year. This is our final presentation on December 2nd with Julie Stevenson, and it's about building a writing career. So not so much focused on that one book, but instead thinking about how you move forward and continue for many years to come, developing your career. We're really excited for this final program in the 10-month series, and we also have an access pass. So if you're just hearing about the Agent Symposium for the first time and you'd like to explore watching those previous recordings, you're welcome to check it out on our website or reach out to us. It's one of the best things we've done here at the Writers League in terms of innovating and creating a new program, and it's been really wonderful. So I hope you'll check it out. And then finally, I want to mention for the folks who are in the Austin area, we do have a free live reading series every month called the One Page Salon. It takes place the first Tuesday of the month at Radio Coffee and Beer on Menchaca Road down in South Austin. And it is a really wonderful evening hosted by the Writers League of Texas, featuring 5 writers who read 1 page from a work in progress. Everyone on that stage is reading something that hasn't really been shared before, which is super cool. You will see really established, notable authors. You will see people who've never stood on a stage before and shared their work, and anywhere in between. It's a really lovely event, and it's also a great place to find the Austin literary community every first Tuesday of the month. So consider joining us for the One Page Salon. Our final one will be on December 5th. And then last but not least, we are a membership-based organization here at the Writers League. We put on free programming for writers. Our programs are open to anyone. We also have paid programming that is also open to anyone, but our members receive a deep discount. But I would say to you, as we wrap up this year and wind down this year, that the best way to help us continue doing what we do moving forward is to consider becoming a member if you're not a member. It's a great great way to support the organization and the community programs that we do, the great work that we do to support writers through our fellowship program, through scholarships for our classes. But it's also a great way to get some benefits and services that are exclusive to our membership. So consider it. If this is your first time with us, feel free to reach out. We'll let you know a little more about us. But if this is your second or third or fourth or fifth program, if you keep coming back for more, but you haven't become a member yet, become a member. It's a great way to make sure that we can keep doing what we're doing. And we would really, really appreciate it. And we're a lot of fun, right, guys? Yeah. Okay, here we go. Oh my gosh. Evan, are you going to take over at this point? Or you want me to keep going? I'm going to pass it over. Let me happily introduce and pass it over to the hardest working member services person in show business, who does so much beyond just working with our members, but he does so much to support our membership and to support the great people who are part of the Writers League of Texas. Evan is above and beyond amazing staff member and has put together the event that you're going to enjoy here today, and also is a part of an event coming up. I know he's going to mention this Saturday. So I'm going to pass it over happily for the rest of the program to our wonderful staff member, member services, digital content, all around Renaissance guy, J. Evan Parks.
Hi, thank you so much, Becca. I really appreciate the fantastic introduction. Before we hop into the program, I wanted to say the program is based around this wonderful anthology that is on sale now. The link to purchase is in the chat box here. I'm posting it once again. There we go. 60% of the profits. We were so thankful when Britta reached out to us to offer this. So anyway, I was so thankful, Britta, to reach out to me about this book because one, I thought the concept of the anthology was just so fun and exciting. It's all about the process of writing, and so we'll talk about that a lot more as we get into the program. But Britta said she wanted to give back with this book as well, and offered to share some of the profits with us. So 60% of the profits of the sale of this book will be benefiting the Writers League of Texas. We will also be participating this Saturday in Austin, Texas at Alienated Majesty Books for the exciting book launch. Bria's holding up her copy here. Here's me with mine. Yeah, everyone's got their book. It is so much fun reading this book. I'm really excited to get this book into people's hands. So I hope you come to the book launch if you're in Austin. If you're not, you can pick up the book online, get shipped to you. It's a really fun read, as you'll soon discover from these wonderful authors we are talking with today. That is going to be, I just highly recommend it. But without further ado, let's move into the program. Welcome to WLT on the Craft of Writing, a mixed bag of tricks. I was thinking of a lot of ways to come up with a creative title past this, but I think y'all did it, just knocked out of the park at the starting gate here with just, this is what it is. It's a mixed bag of tricks. There's so many cool things. Before we really dive into what the anthology is and how it came to be, I want to introduce all of our fantastic authors here with us today. So first up, we have Ishita Fernandes. She lives in North London, England. She creates near-future thrillers focused on the dark side of technology, science, and the impact on society. With over 20 years working in executive positions across some of the largest technology and consulting organizations, she draws upon her experiences as inspiration to create an immersive read. Ishita completed the Faber and Faber Writing a Novel course in 2020. Her first short story, Static Road, fantastic story, by the way, has been published as part of the Mixed Bag of Tricks anthology and represents her sharp, dark, and visceral fiction. She is currently working on her debut novel. Everyone, welcome Ishita. Britta Jensen's debut novel, Aloya Born, won the 2019 Writers League of Texas YA Discovery Prize and was longlisted for the Exeter Novel Prize. Subsequent publications include a sequel, Hirana's War, as well as Ghosts of Yokosuka, her subversive retelling of Hamlet and Ophelia's story. Why Not Ophelia was in the Castle of Anthology of Horror, Femme Fatales, and Noise in the Woods in Mixed Bag of Tricks. Her stories explore themes of persevering through disability, found family, and the intersection of love and various cultures on new worlds. For the past 20 years, she has taught creative writing and edited books. Everyone, welcome Britta. Um, Finally, last but not least, E.A. Williams is a graduate of the University of North Texas, where she studied film and playwriting. While completing her degree, she stretched her creative limits, helping to run a writers collective as well as study special effects. Wow. Her love for the fantastical can be seen in her thrilling debut series, The Lion of Tepes, which invites readers to explore Williams's hometown of Houston through the lens of a sexy vampire noir. Everyone, welcome E.A. Williams, Annie here. Welcome, Britta. Welcome, Ishita. Thank you so much for joining me here for this program today. Well, there's so much love in the chat box. Before we begin in earnest, I wanted to actually open the floor to Britta to really talk about what this anthology is and where it kind of came from, because I think the story you approached me with was so kind, and I want to hear you. I can't put it in better words than you can, I think.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Evan
So
actually
Britta, please.
you got to hear me talk about it. I believe it was the San Antonio Book Festival maybe 2 years ago.
It was
Yeah.
it was last year, I think,
Oh,
at
okay.
Texas Book Festival a year ago.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Um,
Awesome.
I'm pretty sure. I was like, I sent this in an
Yeah.
email to you where I was like, didn't you tell me about this a while ago? I overheard it. It was a conversation between you, Gina Springer Shirley, and I think Miranda Flowers was there.
Yeah.
It was at our Lit Crawl event.
Yeah, it was at the Lit Crawl event and we were just, talking shop because I'd had this idea for probably about 2 years. And I was like, okay, wouldn't it be interesting to have an anthology where it's not at this phase where everybody's actually written the stories, which is normally where most anthologies are, or they'll have a prompt and they'll have people call in. What if we actually started off by giving each other prompts and it's cross genre? So I get matched up, for example, with Annie, who, or like I had thought of like Annie or Roanna with me because they write a different genre. And what would be the result of such a thing? And I said the caveat has to be that they don't have to go to print with that particular piece if they don't want to, because there's nothing worse than writing something and stretching yourself and being like, well, that was just for an experiment, but it was the experiment. It's not the final product. Mm-hmm. So I wanted there to be that creative freedom there, but I wanted there to be this sense of like being together through those phases and getting a chance to meet and talk about the work in progress, which we had, I think, 2 or 3 Zoom meetings just about the process before we went ahead and said, okay, here's the production process that we laid out for ourselves.
Yeah. And like, how was the group's reaction to this idea you brought to them? Like, what? Because I know, how long have you all been meeting before this? I believe it. I remember reading this in the introduction of the anthology.
Yeah, like Ishita and I met through the Faber Academy. So we've been meeting as part of our Faber Academy critique group for 2 years. Is that right, Ishita? Yeah, and then our Texas writers group that's now expanded, much larger than just Texas, obviously. We've been meeting. Well, we all met at the Writers League conference 5 years ago when I was fresh off the boat from Germany. And that's how I met all of them. I was like jet lagged. I'd been here for like 3 days in country. And so like our actual group was formed by Roanna and all of us. And so we've been meeting over Zoom since a little bit before the pandemic hit. But before then, we were just meeting at Writers League events and all just kind of coming together and talking.
That's fantastic. And so you met Ishida 2 years ago, this Texas group 5 or so years ago. You've come together, and then you had this idea about a year and a half ago, some time ago, to put this anthology together. I'm Before I open up to Annie and Ishita, I'm going to ask a few more questions. I'm sorry. I'm so excited to hear from you all. But
well,
I
and
wanted
they're
to
welcome
just
to chime in if I've gotten something wrong.
You are welcome to chime in. Because if you remember something, if I want to hear about like right when you suggested this project, I'm sure everyone was excited to
Some
to
people were
get their
scared.
book onto writing. I
Some people were
bet.
like, that doesn't sound fun. I don't want to do that. They're like, I don't want to write in another genre. I like the genre that I write in. I was like, that's fine. You don't have to join if you don't want to. It's
Yeah.
opt-in, you know. And there were others who like tried it out and said, not so much for me. I'm gonna actually go with a piece that I've, you know, worked on previously. And Heidi's got a great comment about like, we keep picking up new writers all the time at various Writers League events, and other writers, you know, connections coming together. And there's some writers who joined us for just the composition gestation phase, but didn't continue onward because they felt like their pieces were not developed enough.
Yeah. Annie, how did you feel whenever you're first approached to submit something to this or to work on a story? I'm going to be diving into like what prompts you received. What was like this first version of this story you came up with, if it even is the final version that came in the book, because I want to hear about all of this. But just what was the first feelings?
I may be the odd man out here, but when Britta told me that the idea, I was like, let's do it. I want to do it right now. And then it had a bit of a gestation period where we were kind of like, how many people do we really think are going to want to do this? And I was like, I love prompts. Give me a prompt. I will do this all day long. What ended up being my prompt, because I did get paired with Britta, and I did kind of have an idea when I saw that we were going to give each other prompts that I would be getting a science fiction prompt, which is very outside my wheelhouse. I lean always towards fantasy. If I can throw a wizard in there or a dragon or a vampire, I'm going to do it, which I was very close to doing in this story. But the prompt was just so well crafted, in my opinion. It was on a rain planet that has been colonized by humans. There are two people who come together over grief, a priestess and a biologist. The priestess has lost her mother. The biologist has lost his wife. And she gave me some veritables, sort of, there was going to be a knot for a ceremony and a pest insect or animal, and there was sweet rain and a lot of rain. There was a rain theme going on. And the second I read her prompt, I had two thoughts, very wild. The first was Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. There are those temples in the first Lara Croft movie where they are, I think it's Angkor Wat in Cambodia where they filmed, and it's just trees in the temples. And I immediately saw that. And then my second was the 1994 film Stargate. With
I see it.
Vader.
I see it.
Yeah, and I just was like, my brain just exploded with some really fun ideas. And then my first step always in my writing process is to do lists. It's not really, I hesitate to call it plotting because that's not really, we haven't even gotten to that stage yet. But the list was substantial of things I wanted to put in. And I think the first draft was 10,000 words, which is pretty humongous for a short story. And because I write in fantasy, and that's big worlds, big doings. And so I had to sort of draw myself back in with the process. And the more I went through it, the more it felt like it became almost like a meditative process, because I knew I could always come back to the prompt and say like that this is my guiding force in the story, which I don't have in most of my writing because it's just me coming up with the ideas. So to have that guiding factor made the process a little easier when it came to pacing, but a lot harder when it came to wanting to add dragons or wanting to sort of let myself go wild. So for me, the process really became about discipline and saying, hey, you're this little factoid that is super fun to you is not important to the story and what you're trying to say. And I think as a writer, I really sort of this helped me develop that discipline going forward, which I'm working on the third book in my series right now. And I'm noticing that as I'm working through this process with a much longer piece of writing. So it's been really, really a growing process for me.
That's fantastic. We'll dive into a bit more about like what has changed since the anthology a little bit later into the program, but I'm interested in hearing more. So you typically write fantasy, and I saw you write kind of an urban fantasy too currently. What was it like? Because I when I was reading your story, I was like, this felt so natural. I'll say my entire experience reading this book, anytime I flipped the page to a new story, it was a delight because I would go from like a personal essay to like suddenly a far off star, and it was just anytime I hit that change, I'd be just so delighted. I'd be like, "Oh, this is so fun! I have no clue what to expect." So whenever I reached your story, I was playing a little game of just like, okay, I know some of these stories may have been um, in furthering drafts made more towards a genre we're more comfortable as a writer. So I really felt that you were in a kind of really solid space here because I was very carried through with your intro to the story, which was like a fantastic like time lapse of how this society developed into this really really intimate story through just traveling in this kind of pilgrimage downwards. So what was you received your prompt. It sounded pretty well structured. There's a lot of elements there that I really see that you took real good advantage of. When you first received this prompt, I would have loved to see a dragon, and I really noticed all those touchstones you shared. I also was kind of getting a feeling of kind of Studio Ghibli of a way, especially with Derek, our little rodent friend, the Dink. It made me think of his earlier movie. I'm losing the title. The one with the flying device.
I
That's all of them.
I love that you said Studio Gimli. My inspiration for Derek, which if you read the story, he is sort of a big deal. I'm not just saying that. But he the labyrinth, all the little puppets in the labyrinth, I just couldn't, just in my brain, it's just like Jim Henson Studio. It's those little puppets, and I adore them. And I probably watched The Labyrinth way too young. It's very impactful in my brain. But I saw little pieces of that, and the world building from fantasy really bled into which I think you can kind of see, particularly when I'm describing like the forest or the sunken temple. But interestingly enough that you mentioned the intro, that was a really huge change that happened later on in the process, because I got to a point where I realized I knew some of the backstory of how they'd gotten there and had not really explained any of like, this is a colonized planet. And I came back to that touchstone of saying like, oh, this is the prompt to be able to say like, this is where this came from. So it really helped me in that way. But also, have you the Apex Industries, which I explain in that prompt, I just couldn't get over the Wayland Corp from Alien.
And I really felt like, that too.
We got to come back. Like there were all of these like very like core memory, like sci-fi, like 70s, 80s sci-fi that really came into play when describing that very like short intro. But I was just like, someone has to know bad things happened here.
And just starting here, I'm going to probably come back to this topic, but this concept is now I'm thinking about like, as you're writing something like in a genre you're maybe less familiar with, I see this using these touchstones to help you guide your path. I think that's really interesting. Nausicaa, Heidi, thank you. Nausicaa. I was thinking of Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind. That's exactly, thank you. That's the movie. I'm thinking about these cultural touchstones of genre and helping use other stories to develop your own. So I'm gonna come back to that question for especially Brita and Ishita as we talk about their stories. Actually, let's just move to Ishita right now. Let me ask you, how did you come into this project? How were your feelings? What was your prompt? And just tell me about your general experience as you started working on this.
So I think Britta mentioned that we met as part of the Faber and Faber. I think it's 2020 actually, maybe 3 years ago. Um, we started writing on. I started writing my first novel, which is still going on, by the way. But regularly getting updates, and then as part of that process, we did a lot of writing, but also prompts, things like that. And I think she gave Britta a bit more of a flavor of my writing. I started developing my style. So I'm not somebody who is, as experienced as Britta and the other writers in this anthology. I am very much a novice writer. So from that perspective, I've come into this thinking I need to bring my A game. I need to get my standard up. So yeah, it was a little bit daunting, I have to say. So when Britta introduced the idea of the anthology, I was like, that sounds fun, but I'm actually a little bit scared too. I'm not afraid to admit that. So, kind of in the presence of these amazing ladies. So I think the prompts were really interesting. Now I'm from a very much of a, tech background. I love the kind of thrillers that do make you think about things, the nature of reality, specifically AI, various things that are kind of people are starting to think about today. So Kara Stockinger actually gave me my first prompt, which was, I think it was something like a stay-at-home dad discovers that he's actually a robot created by his wife. So I actually started on that, and as I was doing it, I thought, you know what, it's triggered another idea in my head, because I don't know what it was. It was something about my childhood, and I grew up in East Africa. Well, I didn't grow up, I was born in East Africa, and I visited very often. So I live in London, and it was a road trip that I took in Mombasa that triggered a memory. And I thought, you know what, I think I could write something. The robot thing kind of triggered something else, which said, could I do something a little bit more disruptive? And put some surprises in the story, so it kind of goes one way and then I take it a completely different direction.
Yeah.
And I thought, what can I do to excite the writers, and give it a different flavor? And so I've used my prompt more as sort of inspiration, I think, than anything else.
I'll be the moment you said your prompt, I'll be honest. I saw how it connected to the final story. I see that it's really interesting to how how like those through lines from the original prompt to what the story actually became. I'm not going to talk too much about the story. It's pretty short, and I don't want to spoil it for any of our potential readers. But other than saying it's like it starts in this African drive, and there's a dysfunctional relationship at the start of it, and there are several twists and turns following. It's very Black Mirror-esque, I felt. I'm like really in on my cultural touchstones here. So I see you took this prompt and you moved it into maybe something a bit more familiar with, because it is a kind of near future sci-fi thriller that we ended up with, right? How was so did you start with did you try the original prompt as it stood, or did it really just as you started writing it shifted into what Static Road became?
No, I did. I gave it a good go. My husband read it and he said, my God, this is depressing. I'm being very honest here, right? So he said, it's very
Yeah,
dark. It's so dark. It's
it
actually
is a
quite
dark
depressing.
prompt.
So I thought, you know what? I think, and it was actually, I did the flip. So it was actually the wife that was the robot,
Hmm.
and the husband that had created this kind of situation. So, it was pretty dark, and it was going to an even darker place. So I thought, actually, this probably makes more sense to give you something. And I wouldn't say my story is all enlightening. Let me just tell you that. It won't make you, much happier by the end of it. But I do think it's definitely got a little bit more of an arc than the original story that I wrote.
Yeah, it was definitely as I was approaching it, I was like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Where are we going next? It was very enthralling. I think you did bring your A game, Ishita. You stand shoulder to shoulder with all the other writers in this anthology. Just to let you know, give you your flowers. Britta, tell me a little bit about your story, what prompt you received, and how your story came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Annie gave me a prompt for a spooky story, and I hope I get all the elements correctly. Annie, that you gave me, where there was like a grandfather or grandparent that had died, a porch swing, a sort of inheritance, a cabin, noises in the woods, or sounds in the woods. Was there anything else I missed, Annie?
I think it was like random person dies, you inherit, cabin in the woods, there are noises in the woods at night. And that was very bare bones.
Yeah. And so what I liked about Annie's prompt is it gave me like a lot of like direction. I was also terrified because I don't write spooky stories. I love like examining the elements of spooky stories and editing them. Like I edit mystery and thriller, but I myself am like, oh, so much about that is timing and all of these things that I write science fiction and fantasy mostly. And so I was like, I'm just going to follow the prompt. I'm just going to be a good student and try to be A plus and all of a sudden these ideas flooded me because I didn't start writing right away. I just started kind of collecting ideas. And we had deadlines, for your first draft. And then we would meet and talk about the first draft, and then deadline for the next draft, and then talk about it, and then so on and so forth. And so having those deadlines meant I couldn't just like marinate forever. I had to like get stuff done. And so it was great to like think about, I haven't really set a story in Germany where I lived for 7 years and, moved from Germany to here 5 years ago. And so all these ideas from my last trip to Germany last December came to mind because I stayed outside of the city that I lived in Ursula Poppenricht, which is this very, very small village. And like people all like know each other. I've known each other for years. And I hope they won't be offended in my story. Because I don't depict them in very flattering light. And yet I actually love the people there. But I like at first I felt like I had to try to like really create this kind of spooky pace. And then as I was doing the revisions, I felt more like, let me make it more of the type of story I tend to write. And if it isn't as spooky as people necessarily want, that's okay. They'll tell me, they can complain. Um, but it was nice to like really stretch myself and say, if I want to try to write an even spookier story in the future, I can. But it ended up being more about like women's empowerment, which I had not
Yeah.
at all. I had not planned that at all.
Which
So
I think is actually a pretty strong theme throughout the book. I think you get a collection of wonderful women writers. You will have a book that does in some way talk about women's empowerment. But I did notice as I was reading, it's like, this is really women are strong. I was loving it. But as you were talking, I really think I saw the spooky atmosphere. I really enjoyed it. I am a recent convert to the horror genre, and now I'm just obsessed with it. And what I found so interesting about your story, Brita, is that I did feel that it was spooky, but became a kind of cross of genre because I really felt you shifting, you taking this concept and then working into something kind of new and more your voice. And I think I found that incredibly interesting. How you took these touchstones that I recognized. Oh, the big city person moves into the small town out in the middle of nowhere where everyone seems to be colluding against her. Um, and then suddenly became this story of like really taking control, not letting these people scare her away. I loved it.
thank you. Thank you. There was like a moment where Annie very much inspired and has no idea this is now like a reveal that Annie's not heard yet. Where she where like I'll have like a tough day and I'll call Annie and she'll help me out, trying to frame it.
Oh,
So there's a line in there where it's like, let's get us some witches then. And I was like,
oh, I
that
love
so
that.
felt like something that Annie would say if someone's being awful to me.
That's so sweet. And I also, when you brought the setting, I wanted to talk to you about that too, because as we're kind of bringing up this concept of touchstones, of things to help ground not only the reader in these stories as the writers are finding their ways into them, but also ways for you guys to find your way into these different genres. I found your choice to set the story in Germany, because I know you've lived in Germany a number of years, an interesting choice because I don't read stories. I don't see Germany represented in a lot of stories I read. And I found that brought a really interesting flavor as well as I could really feel it just be a grounding feature of the story. How did it help you? Like, did the setting assist you in building this atmosphere?
Oh, very much, very much. Because like when I saw like cabin in the woods, I was like, okay, so my apartment in Germany was set against the woods. Like it was on a hill that's called Maria Hilfberg, which is like roughly translated Maria help me hill or mountain. And so like, you know, I could hear the not the monastery, but the convents, yeah, convents bells.
Convent.
You know, I was like, wait, German or English? Convent. Bells on the hill. And like, you know, in the morning, if I was home when they were ringing, and like if people came to visit me and wanted to climb up that hill, they would actually run into the nuns. Like one of them gave one of my friends a necklace one day that my friend actually gave to me when she visited. And so like I would go on top of this, like climb up that hill that was pretty steep and stand in the woods. And sometimes I'd be the only person. There'd be like a mist curling, and I would be like, oh, if someone wanted to murder me, they could right now, and nobody would find me. You know, because that's what you do when you write fiction. You think of all of these like scary, freaky things that can happen to you. And so, you know, I used to just only go so far into the woods because they're very dense in the part of
Mhm.
Germany. I was in southern Germany, close to the Czech border, in a town called Amberg, and I'll just stick it in the chat so people can, you know, look it up. And I'll just put the name of that hill there too. But I think like because I still dream that I'm in Germany, and my brain still kind of sometimes thinks I'm in Germany because I lived there for 7 years, and then I lived in South Korea before that, and then New York City before that, and then Japan before that. My brain just kind of, you know, really much feels like it's overseas and not here sometimes. And so that's naturally what I tend to write,
Yeah.
you know. And
Uh,
I think like people sometimes are afraid to write things that they know, or settings, like make up brand new settings. And I think you should always experiment and try that out, because I feel like setting kind of grounds you in the character's reality.
exactly. It does. It's a character unto itself in a story. It defines so much of the personality and tone of the piece. I agree completely, and I think your choice in this story was a fantastic decision. Um, I want to step back and look back more into the process of this book real quick. You mentioned meeting a few times to discuss your stories. Did you meet with just your partners, or did you guys discuss as a group these stories?
I think some people met like one-on-one. Like I know Gina met with her partner, because like the authors would share with me who they
Mhm.
met with. I met with Annie, I think at least once or twice one-on-one. Ishita, I don't know how many times you and Kara met or exchanged emails.
Yeah, I think we exchanged quite a few emails and we met as well. It was just a really lovely process. I know I'm in London, so it's not quite the same, have to meet over Zoom, but it was really good. And I think even through the editing process, I think that was quite critical. Um, and we worked very closely together on that. And I think, I've learned so much through that process. My editing skills, were not that great. I think after being with Cara for a while, that they're a hell of a lot better. And I think she is, she's got an amazing set of suggestions. So I think it's great working with others.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and like all of us mostly met over Zoom. I didn't get to meet with Annie in person because she's in Houston, so she's 3 hours away from here. So like some people would talk to me on the phone as well if they had like questions, but most of the time it was email and Zoom that we utilized, which I think is a big time saver. Just being able to see each other, discuss, share on screen if you need to. And then I also used Loom video to like record my screen when I wanted to share something that was harder to understand over email, that would like take me 20 minutes to type up, but 5 minutes to make a video. So I did that as well.
Exactly what you mean.
I think you sent me 1 or 2 looms when you saw my first draft. You're like, okay, I think these things needed to be switched over. But I know that I also, because we were starting from sort of scratch, I felt like I really comfortable talking to all the other authors and sending them emails if I felt like I was stuck in some place. And I know Rowana helped me with a couple of things. Kara, who is an absolute champ, came in, and I don't know how many times she read my story when I was in the nitty-gritty phase, but being able to connect with each of the authors so quickly through Zoom or through email was just an absolute just gold stars. Recommend. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I think the fact we were able to like exchange with more than just our partner was really, really helpful.
That's good. Which I kind of want to continue. I have a question here before I dive into my question. If anyone in the audience has questions for these fantastic authors, we have about 20-ish minutes left in this talk. So we'll see if we have room for a Q&A at the end. If you have questions, drop them in the Q&A box in the Zoom window, and I'll be happy to take a look at them as we get to our Q&A. But I want to go back into our stories again. And let's just talk about, we touched a little bit on like first draft to final draft, but I want to talk about what really, as we shifted from what we received and as we transformed the story, what was changing within your own writing, and like what were you learning really? What was pushing yourself into something else? What did that make you carry forward? And I want to start with Annie here, because I see moving from fantasy to sci-fi and this wonderful world. I want to see like what has this affected your third book and your series?
It's definitely affected my third book. I had to be so concise with setting, which all of my worst tendencies with fantasy are like, you can do whatever you want with the setting. The sky is purple now, guys, go for it. Which to some extent you can justify in science fiction, but you have to really justify it. Particularly, I didn't want it to feel like a fantasy writer had just like been like, oh, well, we'll just explain it with science instead of magic. I didn't want that sort of disconnect between the genre, because I think that I have a lot of respect for science fiction. I love it as a genre. I just had never written in it. But to be so precise and make sure that you have a justification for every action or every little detail has really affected how I go into writing the third book, which has a lot of travel in it, to places that I've not necessarily experienced in being. So there's more research, the same way I did a lot of research for this story. And though the research does look different because these places really exist in the world, and Riva doesn't exist as far as I know. Maybe someday we'll find it. I'm still checking the NASA Twitter, I guess X, every day, hoping, but so far. But it really, the focus on specificity and brevity has really changed how I approach setting in my stories, particularly because finding the right word can encapsulate 16 words. It can take away an entire sentence if you go from describing something as a claw to a talon. You're like, oh, it's a bird. Those are two different things. So it can really help shorthand some of the things that were taking up space in my earlier drafts of my work. So we really saw that as one of the bigger differences.
Fantastic. Ishita, as you're working on your first novel, and as this story changed drastically, I mean, I think I see a lot of the carryovers from what this prompt originally was to how you just tried it already to how what the final product is. But what did you learn in that process? Is there anything that is affecting your current work now that you learned? Um, or
Yeah, I would say
you want to add anything?
absolutely. I mean, it's been a huge learning process. As I said, I think the first draft was very different, and then I had conversations with Britta and Cara, and I realized I needed more twist. And I think one of the things I've learned is, and I think you mentioned sort of Black Mirror.
Mhm.
One of the things I've learned over the last kind of couple of years, I think after the pandemic, is that people are attention and focus kind of only last so long. I find, what I wanted to do and what I was finding is that, to keep people captivated, and, I got a lot of other people to read it as well, just to make sure I was, before I even showed these lovely authors anything, just to make sure it was of the right quality. But also, did it really capture attention? And does it keep it capturing attention? Because it's very easy for me, I think, to go off on a great descriptive piece. But when you're writing a thriller, you need to keep that constant pace. And I think that's a real learning curve for me. And that's something definitely I'm taking into my novel. To keep, wanting to, if this was a Netflix episode, you'd want them to click onto the next page. And
Mhm.
I think that is something that I'm really actively working on, to
I
keep
see.
that pace going. And also the scenes, you want to make them as immersive as possible, and that use all of the senses. And I think in a thriller, you don't hear all the gritty parts in the thriller sometimes, and I try to put some of that real grittiness, the things you'd probably skip over in some of the thrillers, into this story to make it a little bit more gritty. So I think, that probably has stayed with me, that style point, I think, for my novel.
Oh, I love that. And Brita, you've been several anthologies, you have several books out. But is there anything that you've changed or learned through this process?
Oh, big time. Yeah, yeah. There was a moment when I like my draft, it took a while to get into good shape, and Annie and Cara were very kind to me, I have to say, because I was like, ooh, this is not yet feeling like my best work. And if you have several things that are already published, you can feel even greater pressure to be like, I got to level up every time. Like everything has got to be like
Mhm.
better and more genius. And it's like, no, that's stupid. Don't do that to yourself. Like let those thoughts go by the wayside. And so it's helpful to have like a supportive group of fellow writers, even if they're at different stages in their writing process, who can just be like, yeah, Rita, this has novel pacing and it's a short story. And I'm like, oh, great. Thank you for telling me that. Now I know what I need to do with the pacing. And so it was helpful that, Cara told me that, and was, very gentle in her feedback, as she always is. Like she's just really good at giving fantastic feedback, as all of the authors are in the anthology. And I think that helped me to kind of open up my process, because I've got a novel, Orphan Pods, that is on submission. And then I've got another one, Bones of Our Ancestors, that's like kind of a duology. And it's made me kind of expand and give myself permission to have Bones of Our Ancestors be something different, and not feel like, oh, I have to like be chained into this way of doing things. And so I was like, yeah, it's okay if it's like about dance and it's about spirituality, and it's set on this, planet that I've already written one book in, but it's set, maybe 25 years later with new characters. And so I feel like a lot more comfortable with not defining the novel in those early drafts, like those first three drafts. I just want to have fun and play, and
I
then
love that.
nail things down later.
Exactly. And I think if there's one thing I'm taking away from this anthology, is that there's just extreme power in finding a community of writers who will give you that permission to explore something new and to have that place where you can feel free to play and bring an experiment to the table. Um,
Yeah, it's absolutely essential. I agree.
I think it's such a miracle that you guys have each other, and it's something I know many authors are writing for. It's something I'm looking to do in my job here at the Writers League, is to help people find that. But it is hard, and I think it's fantastic that you guys have this together, and that such a wonderful physical thing came of it.
Yeah, it was so exciting to like get, to get it and like, video myself opening it. And, my husband comes home and, we've only been married for 8 months. So he's like, he has had no idea what it's like to be married to an author. And so he's figuring that all out. He's like, it's a book now, it's a physical book. And I think
it's here.
Yeah. And I think like for authors, I want them to all call themselves authors, even if you're not published yet. Like when I was going to publishing events in London, when I lived in Germany, I would go over to the UK at least 4 to 6 times a year for different workshops, publishing events, retreats. And the thing they always told us was, it's not if you're going to get published, it's when. And I think you have to kind of, as an author, you have to think of not only that journey, but also the journey with your colleagues. And really, like, in order to have friends, you have to be a friend. And so like in your early writer journey, lots of people have experienced that whole thing of like giving really detailed feedback to someone else and someone else giving you almost nothing. That's not your good writer friend. You're like, oh, okay, I don't trade pages with that person. I look for someone who there's a sense of some equivalency in some fashion, And I think if you just keep trying and you keep giving and being part of the writing community and making friends, I think that eventually happens. It just can take a while to get there.
Yeah.
So you have to be persistent.
It's also the putting yourself out there, because as many writers are, I'm a bit of an introvert, and then you sort of have to be like, okay, today we are an extrovert. Today we are, like, giving yourself that pep talk and being like, okay, you're allowed to be exhausted after these interactions. But the connection is so worth it that, like, sometimes you'll strike out, but keep pushing and you'll eventually find your people.
Exactly. Yeah, it's hard because it really is putting yourself out there. And as all of us are, most of us writers are so introverted and shy, and it's hard for us to maybe even log into a talk to talk about your book and your story for an hour. It's even harder to even submit your work, to put something out there, and we need that community of people to push us to do that sometimes. Yeah. If there's anything, as we're coming up towards the end of our hour here, I wanted to ask if there's any one piece of advice that you'd like to leave our watchers, our people in the future, the people here now, about finding this community. Britta, you had such wonderful words. Annie and Ishita, would you like to share something?
Don't be afraid to go to the conferences, and even if you are too afraid to really like put yourself out there and talk to a stranger, there are people out there who are going to just latch onto you. I know a couple of in our Texas writers group, a couple of the people who we brought into the group after, because we've been together for 5 years now, we liked their vibe. We saw them and we were like, hey, you're going to come sit with us. You're sitting by yourself. No, you're now one of ours, because we know what it's like to go to those and be nervous. And everyone's a little nervous at those events. They really are worth it if it's just a reading event, if it's a one-page salon, if it's the conference that's going to happen in June, those things are really important to find people who they're in the same boat, even if they're not at the same port, if that makes sense.
I think you make a really good point. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just a real testament to me, Dan and Britta and people like you, Annie, that we even know each other, right? So, I live in North London, and yet, we're working together on this anthology. And over the last few years, I think the world has definitely come closer together, and taking advantage of that, I think, has been an amazing experience for me, certainly. And, I'm most way through my novel, and I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own. I needed a community to read, review, help, and do the same, and we will learn from each other. And I think it's a really positive thing.
Yeah, I agree. Like Ishita and I, we meet every 2 weeks with our critique group that's from that Faber Academy. And like it's such a lifeline. Like Ishita's heard me complain about life stuff and like is so good at like buoying me up so that the writing can happen. I mean, she's like just like all of her professional experience dealing with, I can only imagine, varied personalities has made her excellent for just like, you know, keeping us as a group of like, you know, nervous authors all all together with her like great confidence. And I think like really trying to serve and volunteer if you can, if you've got the capacity. Like I met some really great people volunteering with Writers League and with other organizations surrounding literature. Like it helps so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think those are all very great words. I mean, it was all a lot of promotion for the Writers League of Texas, which I mean, thank you again for the wonderful offer to donate a portion of these proceeds of this book to us. We're very, very thankful for this, and there's no better product I think we could really be pushing because it's just such a wonderful little book filled with so many great stories. In fact, if you are here in the Austin area or within driving distance to Austin, there is going to be a book launch this Saturday, the 18th. Oh, my ring light is turned off. And Britta, can you tell us a little bit about you? I see you put the RSVP link in the
Yeah,
description.
Yeah, so we're going to be at Alienated Majesty at 6:30 p.m. I would suggest trying to arrive a little early because we'll have there's only so much parking there. We've got some overflow as well, but if you RSVP, you'll actually get that information. You can also show up, but right now we've got about 85 RSVPs. So so you know, join the fun. It's gonna be great. We're gonna have all of the authors who are able to drive in or fly in. We'll see if we can't get a little clip of Ishita reading and see if we can't live stream some of it so Ishita can watch and be there. One of our other UK, we've actually got 2 UK authors. So one is in the hospital, so we're hoping she'll feel better and be able to watch perhaps, or at least watch the recording later. But we're going to have a fun reading of several of the authors. We'll have at least 4 or 5 reading. We're going to have lovely Jay Evan giving a nice little interview with our group, and then we'll open up for Q&A so that, you know, if you have any questions here that you didn't get answered, you can ask us more about the process, about writing. And book launches are a great way to not only meet people, but like take a look at how books are produced and what that end product looks like, because it really prepares you for when you get published, because you will.
It will happen. It's not a question of if, but when. Oh man. Well, we're here at the end of our hour. I want to thank you all so much for joining me, Annie, Britta, and Ishita, as well as all of the people watching us at home. Thank you for sharing your lunch break with us. This was such a fantastic conversation. I don't get to do these events myself often, so it's always a pleasure when I get to. So thank you so much for being wonderful speakers. Thank you everyone for coming. Please buy the book. The link is in the chat box. It's in the event description. It'll be on the YouTube as well. Pick up this book. It's a really fun thing to read. And if you're in the area, please come to the book launch. It's going to be so much fun. And I hope to see you all at a writing event soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great one, y'all.
Yeah.